the most unfortunate part about the Haliburton injury is that not only did he not get a chance to finish Game 7, but
next season,
the Pacers season next year is essentially a wash. Like we've gotten two teams in the East, Celtics and Pacers, who
they get their pick back
next year. Yeah,
they got their pick back.
But I think they traded for their pick back because they knew the risk of Hallie playing through this injury.
You think?
Absolutely, they did.
There's no way they big brained it that much.
They traded for it after he got hurt.
I think they traded for it just because 2026 is better than 2025.
They had the 23rd pick in 2025 in this draft. They traded that pick to go get their 2026 first round pick.
I mean, shit, if they big brained it, shout out to them. But I don't think they'll be low in. Like, I think they'll still be a playing team in the East.
They're still gonna be very competitive.
Yeah, like I don't. So like, shout out to them for sure. But I still see them get like the 18th pick.
The way that they approach this offseason.
But I think they'll be more defensive oriented.
But I think Miles Turner might be gone.
Nah, I think he's staying.
Because Miles Turner is an unrestricted free agent, and if you're the Pacers, if we're not going to compete this upcoming season, why are we going to pay Miles Turner $30 million?
Because what's the replacement?
But I mean, exactly, and that's where there's question marks around the team. I just think that Miles Turner, he's played well in the playoffs. He was underwhelming in the finals.
He's all right, yeah.
I think he's a good center, but if he's going to command $30 to $35 million, am I the most comfortable paying that?
No,
I'm not.
Yeah, I'll say I agree with you on that part. I think if you pay Miles $35 a year, you're crazy. I think if you pay him $30 million, you're fake a little crazy too. But I think if you can't find a replacement, and plus Isaiah Jackson's still coming off that ACL injury.
Achilles,
pardon me. And he's built off, he's an athletic freak. Like, he's a rim runner and stuff like that. So that's not the easiest injury. You're kind of stuck in this limbo of, yeah, this year may be a wash, but we still want to be competitive. You know, we still are going to be competitive. We may not have Hallie for this high elite offense, but what does that scream? More defensive oriented lineup. So if you can find a replacement, I'm all for it. But if you can't, it's those conversations with you and Miles Turner are going to be tough because he kind of has the leverage where you kind of need me. And there's not many teams out there that are going to have a ton of money, and you're not going to have a replacement. I don't think, like, you still got Mathurin, who still needs to develop his game. You still have Neesmith, who is young. You still have Nembhard, who, like Drew loves to mention, he had an underwhelming regular season. So now he's gonna take on a more heightened role. So you still have a relatively young roster to where they still need some seasoning to get through, even though they did make a final.
No, they do. I'm not saying that they got to tear the whole thing down. I'm just saying that with Haliburton not playing next season, I'm thinking about not paying Turner more. Because
so he's a Laker.
Because when you injure your Achilles,
good job sneaking that in.
It's not just you're going to be out for the year. It's also the year after that. How are you going to react to playing after a serious injury like that? There's a time period where you have to adjust. Yeah, Kevin Durant has done it, and that's why he gets my ultimate respect.
He's one of the few, though.
And I will say the good thing about where they ruptured their Achilles is it was a right leg. It's not their plant leg. You know, when your left leg is where you kind of lift off and you kind of, you know, you use most of your left leg as a right-handed shooter to kind of push off of your shot more. So the fact that it was
jump shot again.
So the fact that it was a right leg, I don't think for Tatum and Haliburton, I think that's the optimism viewpoint of things. But it totally zapped next season's expectations for making it back to this position. And I do think that now the 2026 first round pick becomes a whole lot more valuable because now who knows where they're going to end up in the hierarchy of the East.
So they're going to play into
Haliburton, him rupturing his Achilles, I think just speaks to a bigger problem that the NBA is dealing with right now. And I think there just has to be less of a load on these guys' body. There's too much of a load on their body in the NBA in the regular season and the postseason. They're not getting enough rest days. Aaron Gordon mentioned that. But also, these guys come into the NBA nowadays with so much more mileage due to how much games they play in AAU. They're playing so many games a year in AAU that they're coming into the league with so much more mileage. And we've seen this year 8 players rupture their Achilles. The record before this year was 5 in 2014-2015 season. We've gotten 3 more Achilles injuries this year. This is the most that players have ever injured their Achilles. And I understand in hindsight, you can say you should protect your player, a right calf injuries. You stay away from that. You don't play on that because there's a chance for this to happen. I think that Haliburton is just the ultimate competitor to where he was not going to allow himself to sit down. And I understand the perspective from where Game 6, he played on it and he looked great and he looked fine. He made it through the game, and you're expecting that same thing in Game 7. And this is game 7 of the NBA Finals is the final game of the year. All chips on the line. This is what he has been dreaming of his entire life, to become an NBA champion, to lead the Pacers to their first NBA championship. So I understand why he would risk everything, because in his mind, he probably thinks the reward outweighs the risk, to where if I can deliver this championship for the city of Indiana, even if I get hurt, I will feel okay with myself. It's unfortunate the way that it happened in the first quarter. It was one of the worst moments in sports, seeing a player go down in that big of a game, because you immediately knew how demoralizing he felt in that moment, knowing that he had popped it, knowing that he was done. He couldn't help his team anymore. And I feel like that was the most gut-wrenching moment. And it speaks to the injury crisis we're having with these calf injuries in the NBA right now. But it also speaks to, I think, the toxicity around how we expect these players to perform when they are hurt. Because Haliburton isn't the only player that has played through injuries. We've seen other players play through injuries, and when they refuse to play through injuries that are more serious than we think, we oftentimes, people, especially in the media, try to criticize them and act as if they aren't really hurt. They're not being tough enough. And we also have unrealistic expectations for these players when they do play on these injuries, and expect them to perform at the level that they should be performing at when they're healthy. But we're not taking into account that they're injured, and they get criticism for playing through an injury and not playing their best when they're clearly hampered. And I think that type of toxic culture around how we speak about it puts the pressure on these guys even more to go out there, to not be perceived as somebody that had given up on their team. Because you look at Darius Garland, he should have not been playing a game in the playoffs in the second round. He went out there because of the public pressure that was put on him, and people saying that he wasn't a true competitor for going out there on that injury. And that's why the public pressure of that just leads athletes to make bad decisions. And sometimes it doesn't escalate to this level to where Haliburton is now out for the year, but that type of pressure is real. And I think I look back at the 2021 Nets with Harden, and he played through a grade 2 hamstring. That zapped 2 years of his career. He wasn't right until 2 years later, to where he finally looked like he got back his explosiveness. And that was because of he wanted to be out there for their team. You know, it's a double-edged sword where these are the biggest moments. These athletes do have to play. But at some point, I think as a whole, the media has to lay off these guys when they do get hurt. And also the team has to do a better job at protecting them from themselves.
I agree with that last point. They have to do a better job of protecting these athletes from themselves. Media plays a piece of it. I agree with that. However, I think that if you are a quarter of a competitive person, it does not have to do with what anybody else thinks. It's what happens in your heart and in your mind. What, in my mind, do I want to do the most? I want to be out there with my guys. I would go to hell and back with my guys if that meant, end of the day, we're raising a banner. That's what it's for me. And I think that I'm not a quarter of some of these athletes, and that of course that we talk about on a religious basis, but on like the super minimal level. And when it comes to me playing in my men's league game, I'm injured. I got a fucked up knee. I just banged it in the first inning of the game. And this is a real story. My knee was killing me. I knew I should not have played, but I looked up and I said, God, just give me an hour. Give me an hour, take this pain away, because there's no way you're telling me in the championship of our league that I'm not going to play. And this is a stupid men's league. We're talking about the NBA. We're talking about the finals. It's not, I think that the media does play a part, no doubt. I'm not trying to minimize what you're saying, but I think that it's the self-drive that a majority of these athletes have to be the absolute best, to want the best for not just themselves, but for their team. That's why they do it.
But it's also, you know, you play through that in your league, and there isn't any vocalization of you doing that or not. If you chose to not play through that, nobody would question you. Nobody would say anything about you.
But I would look on myself and think, I can't believe I couldn't do it for us.
I mean, I understand that, but these athletes, they're getting talked about at a national level, and there is even more external pressure on them to go out
1,000% agree.
And play through serious injuries.
100% I agree with you.
And that's why I feel as if there needs to be more responsibility on people that are covering the game to understand that a player is injured. Yeah. And the first instinct isn't to think that it is faking an injury. Because when the report came out after game 4, when the report came out that Haliburton was dealing with the right calf injury, people thought that he was faking it. Oh, this is the biggest front runner of all time. He's going to fake an injury when he's down in the finals. That was, I saw those reports. That's
disgusting.
But this is what I'm saying is that people's first instinct is to go out and try to minimize the injuries that these athletes are dealing with.
You know what? Now that you say that, I do remember. Skip Bayless put that out.
He did say some crazy shit like that.
Well, Skip Bayless was a big culprit of trying to act
Skip
like he wasn't hurt.
Done. There's a reason why Skip is over. Statements like that. That's disgusting.
It's no different than, Stephen A. Smith questioning Darius Garland with his injury too. He had a big voice the entire second round of the playoffs, vocalizing for Darius Garland to play and calling him soft for not playing through a toe injury. But it was a serious toe injury, and now he's going to be out 4 to 5 months because he played on it. Like it became more serious than it had to be. And Haliburton, I think he plays in that game 10 times out of 10. Hindsight is 20/20, so maybe if he knew he was going to get hurt, obviously he doesn't play.
You never know for real.
But like it cost the Pacers so much more than just that chance.
I'm with you, bud.
Because now it's next year. It's the year after that. And I look at Pacers fans and I really feel for them. And I feel for the franchise and what they've gone through, because Paul George, after a phenomenal year, breaks his leg with Team USA. Yeah. Victor Oladipo, after an All-NBA season where he was one of the best 2 guards in the league, tears his ACL. And now Haliburton, Game 7 of the NBA Finals, after leading that team there, he ruptures his Achilles in the first quarter. These have been the last 3 Pacers franchise stars that has given the city hope, and something devastating has happened to them.
Malice of the Palace in 05. Even Danny Granger, this is a team like every single time they've been on the cusp, they've had to overcome an obstacle. And I agree with both of you. I think you both make great points.
Hey, man, they gave Kobe and them hell.
It's true.
But really, the NBA needs to do a better job protecting the players. Because it's easy for me to read a report off Google and say someone shouldn't be playing. But like you highlighted, I did not know that stat, that the record was 5. And this year, you had 9 players tear their Achilles. 3 of them were on the Pacers. Wiseman in the open. You had Isaiah Jackson a couple weeks later, and then Tyrese. There has to be, and I've said it for the longest time, in the NFL, if there are 25 games, if there are 30 games, there's more injuries, it'd be less interesting. Yeah, the 17th game, I don't think it's made the league any more interesting. But in the NBA, if you have 62 games opposed to 82, I think the league would be better quality. I think you'd have less injuries, and you'd have more rest in between so stars aren't hurt in the postseason. Look at 2021. Amazing finals that year. That season's playoffs fucking sucked because we had injuries left and right for every single contender up until that Nets-Bucks series, and it really does affect the quality of the play. And then you have stars like this missing the entire season, like Jason Tatum, like Damian Lillard, from injuries in the playoffs. And people say, back in the old days, they didn't have these issues. Well, the NBA playoffs increased the first round 2003 from 5 to 7 games. That won't affect the Pacers, of course, this year. They won 5 versus the Bucks, but there's something to be said. I think the league could profit off of more quantity or more quality opposed to greater quantity. It's not like those regular season games in February to March are selling the tickets, and neither is a superstar like Jason Tatum or a player like Tyrese Haliburton when they're out for the entirety of next year, because the season was 82 games, and he spent over half of it playing through injury.
Yeah, I think the happy medium is just lessening playoff series. I don't think the first round of the NBA playoffs has to be 7 games.
Yeah.
That could easily be 5.
Yeah.
Easily be 5.
More upsets, more.
I don't think it needs to go on for that long. Like, the NBA Finals is probably the only one in the conference finals where I think like 7 games is like necessary for it. But I think it starts with that, because then you give these players more rest in between these games to get their bodies right.
What year did it change? Because in 98, they still... It is 2003. Yeah, because I'm watching The Last Dance, and 98, they played the Nets in the first round, and that was 3 games. So that's interesting. So in Jordan's tenure, arguably the best of all time, you had a first round that was 3 games. You didn't feel the need to change it then.